And welcome to FISM News. I'm Samuel Case.
And I'm Renata Kiss.
And tonight, Fed Chair Jerome Powell testifies before Congress.
Meanwhile, Democrats remain divided on supporting President Biden.
And Ukraine takes center stage at this year's NATO Summit in Washington. All right, we begin tonight's news in D.C., where Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell testified before the Senate yesterday, telling lawmakers he's concerned about letting high interest rates stick around too long, but at the same time also said there could be some problems easing up too fast.
We're well aware that we now face two-sided risks and have for some time, but now the labor market appears to be fully back in balance. If we loosen policy too late or too little, we could hurt economic activity. If we loosen policy too much or too soon, then we could undermine the progress on inflation. So we're very much balancing those two risks, and that's really the essence of what we're thinking about these days.
Powell said he's feeling optimistic that inflation is cooling, but said the Fed still needs, in his words, good data to be confident that inflation is moving towards its 2% target rate. Powell is testifying before the House today.
Meanwhile, let's turn to an update on what Democrats think of Biden's electability. We briefly mentioned yesterday that House Democrats met behind closed doors to discuss the president's campaign. As expected, some lawmakers still want Biden to run for president, while others disagree. After the president's lackluster debate, Representative Lloyd Doggett from Texas was the first legislator to call for Biden's resignation. According to CBS News, he made his case for a replacement candidate at the meeting. Meanwhile, New Jersey Representative Mickey Sherrill became the 7th lawmaker calling on Biden to pass the torch. Sherrill argued that Biden needs to make way for new leadership so Democrats could really prosecute the case against Donald Trump. The meeting came after Biden wrote a letter to congressional Democrats on Monday, saying he's firmly committed to finishing the race. He said he wouldn't be running if he didn't believe he could beat Trump.
And President Biden is hoping to assuage some of those Democrat concerns by holding what the White House has now dubbed a big boy press conference. That's not my label for it. That's the White House. Take a look.
After that, the president will hold a press conference, I guess a big boy press conference is what we're calling it, and take some questions from y'all.
This week, President Biden will speak to national labor leaders of AFL-CIO, host the NATO Summit to show the unprecedented strength of our alliance, hold a press conference, a big boy press conference, according to Justin Singh from Bloomberg.
Unsurprisingly, the White House was widely mocked over this label. Many critics say it infantilizes the president as he continues to battle questions over his mental fitness. The Daily Mail says the term suggests that Biden will perhaps speak longer than he usually does and maybe take some spontaneous questions from the press, venturing off from his typical predetermined list.
Meanwhile, swing states seem to be swinging to the right as Biden's mental capacity remains questioned. Based on Electoral College ratings, 6 states have recently shifted toward the Republican side. A Cook political report categorized Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia as leaning Republican after being the toss-up states. It also shifted New Hampshire and Minnesota toward the Democrat side. However, senior editor at Cook Political, Dave Wasserman, wrote on X that the notion that the presidential race is a toss-up was a stretch even before the debate. He added that Trump has a clear advantage over Biden and a much more plausible path to 270 electoral votes. According to his latest analysis, Trump is leading 47% to 44% over Biden. Wasserman called this the most drastic shift in the race all year. Cook Political's editor-in-chief, Amy Walter, wrote that, quote, if Trump were to win the national popular vote by 3 points, it would be a 7-point improvement from his 2020 showing. Now, what this means is that in the states and districts where Biden has less than 8-point advantage, Trump could get competitive.
Now, Renata, I think we can both agree that the Democrats are in a real bind here because From what we can tell from the polling, Biden is going to lose if things don't change. But the problem is if they swap him out, it doesn't really look better. We got some new data here from Emerson College, and I'm just going to list some of these numbers. It's really incredible. So the best option besides from Biden is Harris, but she's still losing to Trump by 6 points. Then you have Governor Gavin Newsom. That's also a name being listed. He's losing by, 8 points. And then another one, this was a long shot, but Governor Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan, she's losing by 10 points. That's incredible. So really, even though Biden's losing, according to Emerson, he's still the best shot they have.
Yeah, so it makes sense why Democrats would want to keep him in the race and not, just go for someone else, because no one else would have the same chance.
And he's a known quantity, at least in the mind of the public. Maybe that's why he has a better shot. Yeah, very weird. Tough spot to be a Democrat indeed. Meanwhile, on the Republican side of things, Nikki Haley, she's officially now released her 97 delegates ahead of the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee next week, urging them to now vote for Donald Trump. In a new statement, Haley said, "We need a president who will hold our enemies to account, secure our border, cut our debt, and get our economy back on track." Despite the gesture, though, there's still plenty of bad blood between both Haley and the former president. A Haley spokesperson said she wasn't even invited to next week's convention, which Trump, for his part, says may or may not change in the coming days.
From your understanding, have you not invited her, and would you want to invite her? Is that an oversight or intentional?
Well, I'll take a look at that. I mean, I have heard that this morning, so I'll take a look at that.
So you would like to see her go?
I don't know. I'm going to take a look at it. I want to see. I know she gave her delegates over. There was a lot of bad blood there. She stayed too long.
Back in May, Haley announced she'd still be voting for Trump, despite previously saying he's not qualified to be the president.
Meanwhile, according to officials, 2 U.S. Marshals shot a carjacker outside the home of Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor last week. The Marshals claimed they were approached in their vehicle by 18-year-old Kentrell Flowers at about 1 in the morning. Flowers allegedly pulled a gun on the 2 Marshals, who then shot the young man before taking him to the hospital for non-life-threatening injuries. Justice Sotomayor was not at home at the time of the shooting. Now, Flowers was later charged with armed carjacking, carrying a pistol without a license, and possession of a large-capacity magazine. Washington, D.C. police confirmed that they were still investigating the incident. And this is the latest of several high-profile crimes in the D.C. area, including the armed carjacking of Congressman Henry Cuellar and a shooting incident involving Secret Service members assigned to President Biden's granddaughter, named Naomi Biden. All right, and up next, intelligence officials are once again sounding the alarm over foreign election interference, while Biden welcomes NATO leaders in D.C. That and more after this break.
Tragically, and all too often, a young mother in an unplanned pregnancy is in crisis. Pressured from others and without the support of the father of the baby, she feels alone, compelled into making a heartbreaking decision she will regret her whole life. But she is not alone. You can be there for her by giving a life-changing ultrasound through Preborn. Seeing her baby on ultrasound is a game changer, doubling the chances she will choose life from 40% to 80%. For only $28 a month, less than $1 a day, you can show a mom her baby on ultrasound. Your love can save a preborn baby and give a lifetime of joy. Give your tax-deductible gift today. Call pound 250 and say the keyword baby, or donate securely at preborn.org/TV.
Well, in our journey through history, let's explore one of the most famous physical pieces of history in the world. This structure was the original sports arena, as it were, at least in the Western world, and it would serve as a model for modern-age professional sports stadiums. Now, the sports that took place in this stadium, though, were vastly different from baseball or football. They were life-and-death battles, killing for sport and for entertainment for the Roman aristocracy.
To watch more episodes of A Moment in History, go to FISM.tv.
What can you tell our listeners about the benefits of being a partner?
It's blessed me with an opportunity to help further the kingdom in a small way, which matters a lot because God takes small things and makes them big. The blessing really has been to be able to take care of my family, but also take care of the kingdom. Going to bed knowing that not only are you correctly managing your investments, but you're doing it in a God-honoring way.
And welcome back to FISM News. I'm Renata Kiss. Well, let's continue our coverage, starting with an unsettling but predictable report coming from U.S. intelligence. FISM's Ian Patrick has the details.
To wildly paraphrase an old idiom, another day, another chance at foreign election interference. Apparently, U.S. intelligence has issued some points of concern as we approach the 2024 U.S. elections. In a briefing from yesterday, one official from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence said that foreign nations are once again attempting to meddle in our elections. Of particular concern are some rather common names, those of Russia, China, and Iran. Now, when discussing all of these nations at the same time, this official said, quote, Russia is a preeminent threat, Iran is a chaos agent, and China is holding fire on the presidential race. Now let's get into specifics on each of those nations. For Russia in particular, U.S. intelligence says the nation plans to covertly use social media to sway public opinion. The official says they are seeing Russia target specific voter demographics, promote divisive narratives, and denigrate specific politicians. The goal here is to reportedly maintain influence in all aspects of the election, from congressional all the way to presidential. And there's not much more elaboration on these efforts, but it does evoke similar warnings of Russian interference during both the 2016 and 2020 elections. It's also worth mentioning that reports suggest that former President Donald Trump is the favored candidate for Russia for this year, similar to reports in the previous two elections. But this year's report has not been widely corroborated, so we don't know the exact truth to that statement. Shifting now to China, ODNI said that the nation is also seeking to influence our elections, but to a much lesser degree. The intelligence official says that China has simultaneously tried to intensify efforts to influence U.S. policy, while saying that it would not interfere in this year's election. According to the intelligence official, quote, even if Beijing sets limits on its activities, the PRC's influence apparatus is very large and at times unwieldy, and individuals that are not under its direct supervision may attempt to influence election activities that they perceive are in line with Beijing's goals. Finally, intelligence says that Iran wants to specifically stoke societal division in America for this year's elections, and one of the primary driving factors for that goal is to apparently encourage and provoke the anti-Israel protests that have become so prevalent. Director Avril Haines herself issued a statement on Tuesday saying the following, quote, we have observed actors tied to Iran's government posing as activists online, seeking to encourage protests, and even providing financial support to protesters. Haines says that those who are targeted by such a campaign might not even be aware they're being supported by Iran. She cautioned these individuals to remain vigilant when interacting with others online. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre seconded that warning during a recent press briefing.
Americans across the political spectrum acting in good faith have sought to express their own independent views on the conflict in Gaza. The freedom to express diverse views when done peacefully is essential to our democracy. At the same time, the U.S. government has a duty to warn Americans about foreign malign influences activities. I just want to convey a firm message from here to Iran and any other foreign actor that seeks to conduct these types of influence activities. Meddling in our politics and seeking to stoke division is unacceptable, and we will continue to expose attempts to undermine our democracy and our society just as we are today.
This is Ian Patrick reporting for FISM News.
Thanks as always for that report, Ian. I'm sure we're going to hear more about that as we get closer to the election. Meanwhile, world leaders are gathering in Washington, D.C. this week for NATO's 75th anniversary summit. President Biden kicked off the event with a speech lauding member states for committing to, quote, every inch of NATO territory across every domain. He focused especially on Russia's war with Ukraine, denouncing Russian President Vladimir Putin, while announcing yet another aid package for the Ukrainian military.
Today, I'm announcing the historic donation of air defense equipment for Ukraine. The United States, Germany, the Netherlands, Romania, and Italy will provide Ukraine with the equipment for 5 additional strategic air defense systems. And in the coming months, the United States and our partners intend to provide Ukraine with dozens of additional tactical air defense systems. The United States will make sure that when we export critical air defense interceptors, Ukraine goes to the front of the line.
Biden's speech and the event as a whole comes amid discussions about Ukraine joining the alliance, with Secretary of State Antony Blinken saying earlier today that Ukraine is on a, quote, irreversible path to NATO membership, which the U.S. State Department says will be reflected in a joint communique very soon.
I will say I think we have landed in a place, and you will all see this when the language comes forward, that makes clear, as we have said, that that Ukraine's future is in NATO. And the communique will make that very clear, and you'll all get to see the language and talk about it when it's publicly released.
Meanwhile, the 2024 presidential election is looming in the background, with Fox News calling the summit a make-or-break event for President Biden amid all those concerns about his mental fitness. And with Biden increasingly trailing in the polls, NATO leaders are now preparing for the return of Donald Trump, who, of course, frequently criticizes NATO members for failing to meet their financial obligations.
Meanwhile, Iran isn't slowing down its ambitions for military expansion anytime soon. In fact, the country is ramping up its war machine. Reuters recently released new satellite photos of Iran possibly expanding its missile supplies. Iran's foreign ministry said that if a war breaks out between Hezbollah and Israel, the country would be on Hezbollah's side. IDF Major Amiad Cohen responded by saying that Hezbollah is a real army. He said they may not have many tanks, but they have plenty of rockets. Cohen said the military group has 150,000 rockets, with some capable of reaching 500 kilometers, which is essentially all of Israel. He added that tens of thousands of these rockets are also accurate, making it a different war from Gaza. What's even more alarming is that Iran's arsenal of rockets outnumbers most European countries' supplies as well, potentially posing a further threat to nearby regions.
Alarming is the right word there indeed, Renata. Meanwhile, it appears it's the end of the line for that U.S. aid pier in Gaza. U.S. officials confirmed this week that the $230 million pier will now be permanently dismantled following a long list of setbacks. Although the Biden administration had hoped to keep the pier open through this September, it has been unable to handle the rough seas around the Gaza Strip. Officials say the pier will be temporarily reassembled one last time for some use over the next several days, after which it will be permanently removed.
Meanwhile, U.S. troops are leaving the West African country Niger in a significant blow to regional allies. American soldiers formally withdrew yesterday from the small air base near the capital, following an agreement with the military junta that seized power last year. The anti-U.S. military leaders gave Washington until July 26 to reduce troops and equipment in the country by 2/3. The Pentagon ordered a full withdrawal by mid-September. Now, officials say the majority of troops are being moved to Europe for now. However, that leaves a gap in counterterrorism efforts in the Sahel, a region south of the Sahara Desert with ties to Al-Qaeda and ISIS. This has sparked concerns of a resurgence in extremist terrorist activity, and U.S. military leaders are saying that they will focus on building partnerships and strengthening relationships in West Africa to fill that gap.
And before we go to a moment in history, we do have an update down in Haiti, something we've not covered for a little bit of time here. The country is now celebrating a victory as police have now taken back control of the country's largest public hospital. Violent gangs have been in control of the Port-au-Prince hospital for the past few months, accelerating the collapse of the country's healthcare system. Police recaptured the building on Sunday in what is a major step in regaining control of the capital. But sadly, the current state of the hospital means it won't be helping anyone for some time. In fact, Haiti's new Prime Minister, Gary Conille, said it looks like a war zone.
When I was here, 1,500 people used to come to this hospital every single day. And today, it's impossible for them to have access to care. A hospital is not a war zone. Even under the worst circumstances, hospitals are protected.
This comes as the tide could be turning for Haiti as 200 Kenyan officers arrived on the island last week in the first wave of a multinational task force. All right, and we have plenty more news to get to up next, but first, let's go to a moment in history.
Welcome back to A Moment in History. I'm Seth Udinsky. In the story of America, one man stands tall, quite literally, as possibly the most important iconic figure in our nation's history. He was both humble and shrewd, a man of easy demeanor and tenacious mental toughness. He, in some ways, single-handedly guided the nation through its darkest period. 85 years after its founding, the United States was fractured over the issues of slavery when 11 southern states seceded. The nation needed a leader to save it, and it got that in its 16th president, the tall wood splitter from Illinois, Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln was every bit the mythological figure who would become the man to guide the nation through its darkest hour. He was tall and easygoing, born and raised in poverty in Kentucky. He then moved to Illinois as a young man and entered the political sphere as a member of the Whig Party. Now, he entered the House of Representatives in the year 1846. Now, at this time, a third party in the Union began to gain steam, and in 1856, Lincoln abandoned the dying Whig Party in favor of this new faction, the Republican Party. Like the Whigs, the Republicans favored the North, but unlike the Whigs, the Republicans were, for the most part, the party of abolition, where the Whigs seemed at least friendly to abolition, but unwilling to destroy slavery altogether. Lincoln rose to prominence in the Republican Party, and he was elevated for nomination in the 1860 presidential election. He won the election, but he inherited a nation divided. Months before he began his first term, 11 southern states seceded from the Union, and as he began his first term, the treason of the Confederate States led to the outbreak of the Civil War. Now, as Providence would have it, Lincoln was the perfect man for the job. He guided the nation through all 4 years of the war, which lasted the duration of his 4 years in office. Not only did he lead the North to victory and the Union to ultimate preservation, he also brilliantly navigated the difficult terrain of slavery. His leadership would bring about the Emancipation Proclamation and finally the 13th Amendment, which would outlaw slavery in the nation forever. So Lincoln was brilliant, doing whatever was necessary to preserve the Union. And as he was for the war, he was the ideal man for the job after the war. Most of the nation felt this to be the case as he won a second term in the 1864 election. Weeks after he began his second term in 1865, the Confederates surrendered and the war was over. But not a week after that, Lincoln traveled to a theater in Washington, D.C. to view the production of the patriotic comedy Our American Cousin. During that play, Lincoln was shot and killed in cold blood by Confederate sympathizer John Wilkes Booth. Many historians believe the tumultuous period of Reconstruction could have gone much differently had the man who had preserved the Union been able to finish his second term. Lincoln is remembered as one of the greatest presidents in American history and one of the titanic figures in the history of the world. Thanks so much for joining me once again for A Moment in History.
Do you know what you are supporting when you purchase mutual funds and stocks? Think about it. When you invest in a company, you make a decision to support the things that that company supports. And it may not be things that you agree with. Financial Issues is a ministry teaching people like you how to invest biblically, responsibly, keeping your investments clear of companies that may support an ungodly agenda. Learn more by going to financialissues.org. Financialissues.org.
Emmy was in a bad relationship when she found out she was pregnant. Her boyfriend told her to get an abortion, which she seriously considered. Now, Emmy knew that if she got an abortion, a part of her would be broken. So Emmy went to a preborn center in need of guidance. They were able to put every fear at ease and let her know it was going to be okay. And because of preborn, Emmy's little boy is here. She couldn't imagine life without him. Preborn clinics introduce moms in crisis to their babies through ultrasound while providing hope, love, and the gospel in action. Would you join Preborn in helping more moms choose life? For $140, you can sponsor 5 ultrasounds and help rescue 5 babies from abortion. To donate, dial pound 250 and say keyword baby. That's pound 250 keyword baby, or donate securely at preborn.com. That's preborn.com.
welcome back to FISM News. I'm Renata Kiss. Well, let's continue with an update on Hurricane Beryl. Yesterday, President Biden said he couldn't distribute emergency aid supplies, including power generators, to Texas until the White House was able to track down state leaders. He earlier approved a 75% reimbursement grant for cleanup efforts for all 121 counties affected by the storm. As of last night, 2 million people were still without power. But the hurricane's impact isn't the only concern. Heat is also an issue. Temperatures have soared with a real feel between 100 and 103 degrees. CNN reports that some of the generator-powered homes caused at least 2 deaths stemming from carbon monoxide poisoning. Texas Division of Emergency Management Chief W. Nim Kidd advised placing the generators far away from living and sleeping areas. The Public Utility Commission of Texas said restoring power will take anywhere from a few days up to 2 weeks in some areas.
And while it's certainly hot in Texas, there seems to be no end in sight for the scorching heat wave plaguing much of the western U.S. More than a dozen weather stations reported that current temperatures have broken all-time records in the region, many of which now go back 50 years or more. Just this week, cities such as Palm Springs and Las Vegas saw temperatures as high as 124 degrees. More than 70 million people remain under heat alerts. Officials in Oregon confirmed on Monday that they are now investigating at least 4 potential heat-related deaths as temperatures hit over 100 degrees in the Portland area. And yesterday, California officials placed the entire state under an excessive heat warning, urging residents to stay inside and do whatever they can to keep cool. States affected by the heat wave also include Arizona, Nevada, Colorado, and South Dakota.
Meanwhile, the Federal Trade Commission released an interim report yesterday highlighting concerns that pharmacy benefit managers are increasing drug prices and reducing accessibility. A 2-year investigation found that the 6 largest PBMs now manage 94% of prescriptions filled in the U.S. The 3 largest, CVS Caremark, Express Scripts, and Optum Rx, control about 80%. Now, the scathing report warns that these powerful middlemen may be profiting by inflating drug costs and squeezing Main Street pharmacies. Commission Chair Lena Khan says that independent pharmacies in rural communities are the most vulnerable. The industry has strongly rejected the report's findings. They argue they save customers money because their size lets them take on pharmaceutical companies. But the FTC says the companies have not fully complied with information requests. They've threatened to sue if the companies do not cooperate.
And finally, soaring rent prices are creating new problems for small businesses. That's not exactly new news, but the new numbers are certainly shocking, as so far this year, the average business has paid over 9% of its cost towards rent. That's according to the Bank of America Institute. For comparison, the average monthly share was just under 6% back in 2019. A recent poll found nearly half of small businesses cannot now make their rent on time. This, of course, comes amid the housing affordability crisis as well. Redfin's latest data shows that the median U.S. home sale price narrowly missed $398,000 in June. Just incredible numbers that we're seeing here. It's insane that I can't imagine anyone affording anything to live or work these days.
Right, yeah. I'm very much a fan of tiny homes at this point.
Yes.
All right, well, that's our program for today. Thank you so much for joining us, and please visit FISMnews.tv for more content.
And you can find us in the meantime on social media. We'll see you tomorrow with more news coverage. Catch you then.